this digital session of Inpho Venture Summit. Very happy to welcome you today or this afternoon, depending on where you're located. As you know, Inpho is a conference we're organizing every 2 years only in Bordeaux. And you can see this very nice place, and we are looking forward to welcoming you. And today we have the digital session, as you can see from the next slides on the screen. I'm very pleased, of course, to welcome for this session 2 key speakers and 2 key investors, Aymeric Renard from our Venture Club, and also François Véron from New Fund. We will introduce you very briefly, but as you know, Inpho is a well-known investment conference now, and I'm always pleased to mention that Eric Benamou said that Inpho has become the leading event for deep tech investors. We are quite happy about that because we're organizing Inpho since 2008. And just for the history, we started Inpho because in 2008, we realized that a lot of investors are more investing in software than in deep tech at that time, but very interesting in hardware because of the cycle of investment were longer than in software. So we thought that it might be quite good to gather the investors interested in deep tech. So this is what Inpho is about. As you can see in the next slide, we are very happy because since 2016, companies that have participated to Inpho, I raised more than 1.4 billion euros, which means that the topic we're addressing at Inpho are very important and quite attractive for investors. And Inpho is organized in Bordeaux, France, but it's very international. We had more than 24 countries represented in Europe, US, Japan, and more. And we are really welcoming the top speakers, well-known, forward-thinking. And we are also very happy to have a very interesting board joining us for Inpho, gathering top leaders, as you will see in the coming slide. So what I can tell more about Inpho is also that we want to address the question of what's next to invest in deep tech, what are the next frontier in deep tech investment. And to address that, we have a president, George Grass, with the managing director of Aviate Venture. He was previously the general manager of IBM Venture. And George has been the president of Inpho for many years now. As I said, we're really looking forward to address what is important to invest in deep tech, but also to address the societal challenge and economic challenge, obviously. But George is not alone. We have also a very strong board, as you can see on the slide coming, where we have 14 members, and we are quite happy to have Aymeric Renard with us today, but also very active in the Inpho board for many years now. And the topic of today, we will address the topic of dual use and defense. And we could not have done this session without you, Aymeric, because I know for a long time that you are mentioning that dual use and defense is a very interesting topic to focus on. So we are looking forward to have this topic with you and to get your point of view on this. So you see the different digital committee members, all investors, all looking forward to detect promising company, but also to answer the questions, what's next to invest in deep tech. So if we go to the next slide, as you can see, we were expecting 3 speakers today. We have Aymeric Renard with us from Hardware Club. We have François Véron from New Fund as well, and I will let you introduce yourself. And I'm deeply sorry to announce that Matthew Costs is sending his apologies because he has been called in New Mexico. He cannot be with us today due to travel challenges. His flight has been changed, so quite challenging for him to join. But he promises to come back for a digital session and answer all your questions, meaning that for all our participants, I'm really encouraging you to ask all your questions during the session. We will do our best to answer all of them. And I will also pass them to Matthew, so Matthew can also answer if you have specific questions for him. But first of all, now I already spoke a lot. I love first to ask Aymeric and François to introduce themselves. Maybe we can just go back quickly to the previous slide so we can have a short introduction by François of his activity, of New Fund, and also his own definition of dual use and defense. And I will have the same question to Aymeric just after.
Thank you so much, Géraldine. Hello to everybody. New Fund is a transatlantic firm, meaning that we're active on both sides of the pound. We have a portfolio of around 120 company, and 50 of them are located, headquartered in the United States. The team is 25 people. Altogether, we manage 400 million euro. And why we're here, we've been doing deep tech for a while, not in a dedicated fund, but across our generalist funds, and for example, financing a company such as Infinite Orbit in the new space area. It was very civil at the beginning. It was dealing with the life extension of geocommunication satellites on the geo orbit. And more, this question become linked to what's happening in Ukraine, more specifically with the Russians, and generally speaking, the rise of hybrid warfare. So we have this dual use approach that is civil initially, and now more and more, let's say, military, even if we're not involved in the kill chain. And we can understand that the movement can also move on the other side. For example, infrastructure that are now targeted in various areas of the globe become natural target in the way warfare is evolving. We are also seeing a very high sensitivity to electronic warfare and telecommunication. And so it's the all aspects of what was called Internet of Things that is now seen as a target of some countries in a tense geopolitical environment. So I'm not saying that everything is weaponized and that geopolitics is leading venture, but it's large budgets in Europe. It's a lot of assets can be taken as targets. And so we have a very large extension of this dual use approach at Newfund.
Thank you very much, François. And I have a lot of questions for you just after. Emeric, please introduce yourself, your fund, and also why dual use and defense topic that you're pushing within Inpho for many years now.
Sure. So first of all, great to be here. And I'm obviously looking forward to Inpho in Bordeaux in October. So it's always an exciting time to attend. And the fact that it's only every other year makes it extra special. So that'll be great. And on our side, so I'm Émeric Renard. I'm based in Silicon Valley for HCVC. Our roots are in the hardware club community that my colleagues launched ahead of launching our fund. I've been in the US since 1990. That's when I went to the US for college at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. Started working in Manhattan for a European telecommunications firm. I moved to the West Coast in 1996. I've been in Silicon Valley since 1996, investing mostly on behalf of corporations spanning telecommunications, electronics manufacturing and supply chain, semiconductors, and data storage. And I joined our team in 2017 to help raise the first fund. So we are also transatlantic. We're a little bit smaller. We're a little bit younger firm. We're on our second fund in the process of raising our third. We manage about 140 million. I'm based in Silicon Valley. Let's just say our entire US team is here on this call right now in front of you. But main office is in Paris, where our fund started, and we also have an office in London. So from there, we've done investments across 12 European countries, so truly pan-European. On that side, obviously, we have a bunch of investments in the US across California, New York, Pacific Northwest, Midwest as well, some other Western states. And the team is really something unusual about us for a team that started in Paris, that everyone's been an expat. Everyone has a NATO member country passport. A number of people have done military service. We have 11 languages spoken within the team. So not only are we truly pan-European, but we have strong connections into the Asian ecosystem with Japan, Taiwan, Singapore. And so we use that really to facilitate business relationships for our portfolio companies to go transatlantic and trans-Pacific. So we invest in most things hardware-centric. So we'll do software for hardware, design and control it, simulate it, secure it, manufacture it. We do systems and component and subsystem level companies, and we do most of our companies are full stack hardware, software services across a wide variety of industries. So obviously defense dual use, which we kind of slid into starting in 2018. Also brought aerospace, energy management, which goes towards resiliency, food tech, precision agriculture, medical devices and biotech, physical retail tech, warehouse automation, manufacturing, robotics. So broad range of technology areas, lots of competencies within the team to tackle as well. spanning automotive, AI, medical, manufacturing, chip design, et cetera. So we're early stage also. We do pre-seed, seed, small Series A in terms of our first checks. Obviously, continue investing throughout the life of a company as much as possible. And as I mentioned, yeah, so we've been doing dual use. You know, the time is still good for dual use. I'd argue a better time would have been a couple of years ago, but now is not a bad time. I think dual use in defense, clearly we are going into a world of more conflict, not less. Technologies have rapidly advanced. We're seeing an incredible amount of innovation on the field and operational theaters like in Ukraine, but also obviously in the Middle East. We're seeing a lot of international developments and partnerships of bringing technology from Ukraine to the Middle East, especially with the conflict now kind of between Iran and a number of other countries. And you have other areas where we're going to see challenges probably, right? I mean, obviously, China's been saber rattling over Taiwan for quite a few years. They seem to be getting more serious. The Trump administration seems to be waffling in terms of its support, at least publicly facing around Taiwan. So that creates dangers for the country as well as opportunities for startups and larger companies in this space. You also see Japan reindustrializing and getting more serious about defense with their new head of state. Korea obviously has to wonder about the U.S. support going forward as well. So they're doing a big push, and you're seeing companies on their side, like Hanwha, doing a lot of partnerships with both American and European defense tech startups. So it's really kind of an incredible time in this sector, and it doesn't seem like we're going to get to world peace anytime soon. So huge opportunities in front of us, and yeah, we're going to be continuing to support that ecosystem.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So again, for our participants, please ask all your questions. We will try to answer all of them. So start as you want. I know that within the audience, we have investors, we have also innovative company, and in all the topic you mentioned, semiconductor, energy, any industrial application, robotics. So the goal is really to understand also if those companies could be also investment opportunity for you. That will be definitely discussed also during Info. But if we go to the first questions, because what I suggest is that we start by understanding also the dynamism of this investment in deep tech and defense. Because one of the first questions, as you can see on this slide, is dual use and pure defense. What is the real risk and return for a VC today? Is that quite obvious? Because for the last 10 years, we haven't really considered investment in defense. So I love to understand better on your point of view, what only the opportunity is, but what is the risk is related to that, because I guess that for your investment decision in the months and years to come, that will be also the angle you will address. And do you want to start on this?
Yeah, sure. You know, broadly in the category, dual use can be a hedge for defense applications, and the flip side of that, the civilian aspects of dual use can be a hedge on the other side. So in the case of some of our companies, you look at a company like Inpho Photonics, they do small silicon photonic gyroscopes for precise navigation in areas where GPS is spotty or it's being spoofed or denied. So in the beginning, really, their assumptions would be that, yeah, there would be some military applications eventually, though there are a lot of big classic military companies doing IMUs for inertial navigation. But they said, you know, we have robotaxis coming out, autonomous trucks. Some of them are going through canyons, whether it be urban canyons in big cities or in some areas where they're underground or in a quarry or doing mining applications. GPS signals don't always reach. You need precise positioning if you're going to automate all this stuff. And so there's going to be need for the technology. And obviously it applies to other areas. But really pretty quickly, we saw that the military was going to be a much bigger pull for the technology in the near term than the civilian. Civilian's still going to be big. And now we're seeing massive deployments of robotaxis in certain areas. And that business is starting to take off. But on the other hand, the applications for Anello's technology and things that fly, whether it be drones, planes, or be automated or not, or teleoperated, is gigantic. Also applications for maritime applications, you're seeing tons and tons of unmanned surface vehicle technologies, basically autonomous boats of various sizes, different roles. Some are attack, some are observation, some are transport and cargo. And then you're seeing subsea applications as well. And you're definitely not getting your GPS signals underwater. And so you need other solutions to be able to navigate and do tasks. So they started with kind of like heavy civilian focus and have really expanded. The same technology just goes very smoothly on the military side. Other companies were designed to be kind of 50-50 from the beginning. You look at a company like Antara Space doing operating systems for satellites, digital twin configurators, and mission control systems. It's really kind of an even split between applications for government and military technologies, as well as civilians. And part of that is the premise that it's getting cheaper to send satellites into space. Component costs have gone down, except for DRAM storage now, thanks to AI, but in lots of other areas. But not everyone knows how to write an operating system, especially not one for space. It's tough to send someone out to reboot a satellite when it's crashed. So there are a lot of civilian companies that are customers of Antares, but at the same time, the government sector is strong. A company like Cosmic Robotics really started as a civilian tech company doing placement of solar fields in remote areas where you need to be able to place a lot of solar panels quickly to develop a solar farm. That has a lot of applications, obviously, also into military engineering, base deployments, setting up structures in a field without tiring the soldiers with that kind of stuff. So it's really become an area where you have opportunities truly on both sides of the fence. Every company is going to have a slightly different mix. And that mix will vary kind of over time, depending on what's going on in the world and the nature of the technology. The risks on the defense side are obviously things around export controls. You have things like ITAR in the US. You have similar structures in Europe. So depending on the nature of the technology, their ability to export it and sell beyond their borders may be a little bit limited, though obviously structures like NATO kind of help that, and certain types of technologies have no problem kind of going over to being sold in countries due to past defense tech relationships and prior waivers for export control. So there are some risks around that, but it's manageable. As to the long-term risks, again, I alluded to earlier that we get into a very peaceful world. I don't think that's unfortunately going to be the case for potentially ever. It's probably human nature. So the other risks are more really around kind of how you find an exit, and we can talk about that also.
Just after, yeah.
Question touching on that later on.
Perfect. François, what is your point of view on that? And also the question is, will a defense application trust startups? Because of course you need to have very reliable solutions. So very interesting also on your point of view on this.
I'll be short because Emeric has said a lot of things, and I completely agree with what he said. And I think we all want to keep some time for the questions. Short answer is that we're living in uncomfortable times, and the fact that we're around this table is that we recognize that. So we're not in an approach of de-risking whatever it is. Probably the landscape will be completely different if we invest now and want to sell in 5, 6, 7 years. What I would say is that the military is probably going to take the lead in the value creation, because that's where the sense of urgency is the highest at the beginning. Not saying that that gives the largest market, but it's where the application will be most critical at the beginning of the deployment of the startups. And so this idea of dual use that was very important to justify investment in defense in times of peace becomes, from my opinion, a little bit less critical, because what you want is combat ready, is things that work actually on the battlefield and that can be delivered rapidly at decent cost, because apparently cost is something that is very important in today's warfare. So that's the elements I think that are more critical than potential forward-looking civil applications.
Yeah, and if I can add also, going back to the question of like, will the military be able to trust startups in the space? It's already happening, right? In some cases, you look at companies like Lockheed Martin, they've been really active investors, I think in the past year, probably like at least like 13 or maybe up to 17 publicly announced investments. They're co-investors with us in 2 of our companies. You look at entities like In-Q-Tel, which is a sovereign wealth-ish type of fund, right? Arm's length. Obviously, they've been supporting startups for over 25 years at this point in the area. So, and a lot of them have military customers. And then you're seeing a lot of partnerships between established companies and established primes, whether it be Airbus partnering with startups or Rheinmetall partnering with startups. I'll also mention Lockheed Martin. So they're trusting startups. And in some areas, you're seeing, like especially Ukraine, they had to start with startups, right? They couldn't get enough equipment. The West was very slow in sending equipment for them, so they had to improvise. You know, the CEO of Rheinmetall was kind of dismissive when he talked about Ukrainian tech, saying it's a bunch of housewives with 3D printers. Well, sure, they may have started with a very kind of like kit-based and almost amateurish application of like drones, and yet now they're leading the charge with extremely sophisticated applications. And I was at a demo day recently with a bunch of Ukrainian companies, and there was a pattern of companies doing a couple million the first year, double-digit million the second, going up to triple-digit, up to sometimes 400 million in revenues from companies that started with kind of hobbyist projects out of desperation because the entire population practically was getting motivated and involved in the war effort, either kind of directly on the front lines or on a technology side. They have extremely smart people, and those are going to turn into some very serious companies in terms of product line and technology. Like one of them is doing really some cutting edge things on the infrared side of things, really kind of displacing and becoming credible competitors for classic American companies in the space.
Right, so also strong momentum on that. But the question is also related to credible exits, and I will go to you, Francois. Basically, we have a market which could be a single buyer market, government driven. You mentioned already the export challenge. Is it a challenge for exits?
Yeah, I think that from an investor perspective, this is a bet of the fact on the change in doctrine and the change of profound organization. If the idea is that everything will sort of continue as it is right now, but just implementing some new elements such as drone or electronic warfare, it doesn't make a ton of sense for an investor to step in. If we consider that we are actually living in these uncertain times that we were talking about, probably the current NATO doctrine will change, and then people will have to reorganize. Not saying that the primes won't be at the center of the decision-making process, but they won't be the only channel. And so I think we have to consider that today's landscape is not a proxy for tomorrow's organization in exits. We're seeing a strong appetite also in the American NASDAQ. For example, look at the Swarmer, which is a company that has been introduced, IPO'd recently in February or early March. It's a very strong equity story, and it's probably only the beginning. So you have an appetite right now in the American market. It's probably different, of course, in Europe.
Interesting. What is your point of view, Mike, on the exit?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to see, so we will see some acquisitions of startups by primes. The IPO market, as Francois mentioned, has become a real option. And the fact that a company largely Ukrainian was able to go public in the US to really solid success is a great sign. There'll be others. And the thing for some of the continental European countries will be, what do some of the local governments let the startups do in terms of like around concerns of sovereignty and control, right? We've seen in the past some European companies sometimes try to get acquired by other companies, and there are blockages for various reasons. Are we going to see that? We'll see that less from Ukraine. So there's something to be tested there, but certainly in terms of potential, in terms of the revenue potential and the results, there's no reason why we couldn't have a lot more IPOs over the next couple of years. Certainly, we're seeing the revenue traction around that.
Interesting. That's okay. That's definitely a lot of good lights are open for investment in this topic. So I understand also why Emmerich, you were pushing it for info, because just before give the time to our participant to write their questions, because for the moment I haven't received so many questions. So what I will do, I will give a very short presentation of info. So we go to a couple of slides now, showcasing what info is about, because what we're doing right now, addressing this challenge of dual use, this is exactly what we are doing within info. So info, as you can see on the coming slide, is oh no, sorry, you have more one question before, sorry.
And by the way, maybe I can address kind of the single buyer aspect.
Let's do that for that first. And I'll come with my advertising on info after. Okay, quick question on this one. Most of the time as a fund, you have a 10 years life cycle, I will say. And if you're addressing this procurement cycle that are about 7 years, for example, or even longer, is it a problem for the breaking of your IR structure? Is it compatible to have the cycle of a fund and the cycle of investment in defense, in other words?
Again,
your
I
point of
think
view?
that the procurement cycle will change. Exactly how the type of startup that Emmerich was describing with this very rapid ramp up in sales is something that we've never seen in the recent years in defense. You were waiting for contracts, you had specification, and then you were sort of executing, and that was defining this very long procurement cycle. Now, what we're seeing is iteration at the speed of actually the combat. So it's weekly iterations, a monthly program. The Ukrainian industry, they want to build, I think it's around 77 million drones this year, but they're already working on missiles, that is the chemicals on the missiles and so on. So it's really one bottleneck after the other, and expanding the capacity to support the combat of the armed forces and the objectives of the military, not trying to transform potential threats into specification and then fabrication from the primes actually, and subcontracting to the startup. So it's a completely different value chain. We will see early exits, and probably very, very early exits. We will see, of course, companies that will need more time. And I think it's more a question of portfolio construction than a sort of typical path that will be replicated across the different startups in the portfolio.
So there is a change of paradigm in a way. So
Yeah.
it's not the same cycle. Understood.
Absolutely.
Same point of view, Emmerich, on your side?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great points. And also, in some cases, you're seeing deep tech funds already moving to 12, sometimes 15-year cycles to address really aggressive bets and forward-thinking things, oftentimes around space tech, because that can take some time to mature. You have a lot of different vehicles that can fund companies in terms of non-dilutive funding and grants, which can help make it easier and reduce the need for dilutive capital from VCs to fund the company. So in a way, sometimes, one of our portfolio companies that's in physical security, not technically kind of classic defense, they've, 2 years into it, they benefited from $6 million from the US government across various kind of development programs and things like that. And that's great because that's non-dilutive. That would have been a more significant raise from VCs in the past. And then that helps them get to product readiness. So it's easier to get to an exit. You also have companies that specialize in venture leasing and specifically for governmental customers in defense. They take into account the nature of government accounts and payment plans and things like that. So that can help in terms of funding the companies and reduce the need to put a ton of money from any particular VC. And then obviously, as companies get larger, you're seeing a lot of secondary activity, right? You look at a company like Anduril that started really in 2017. They've had a lot of different secondary sales, so that can bring some liquidity to earlier VCs in there ahead of a traditional exit. But frankly, also they could have gone public probably a year or 2 or 3 ago now, right? Some companies are choosing to stay private for a reason, which then puts, generally unlocks more capabilities for some insiders to exit earlier.
Okay, fair enough. I understand that. But you're right, it's definitely a change of paradigm. So indeed, the VC world has to adapt to that and maybe take the opportunity to invest in this topic. And as we said before, this is what we're going to discuss in Inpho. And I wanted to share also with the participant the opportunity to join Inpho, because within Inpho, you will have this opportunity to meet and speak directly with private investors. We don't have journalists within Inpho. We don't have a communication team. We have people speaking frankly. And this is what Inpho is about, as you can see on these different pictures. But more than that, let's have a look to the different topics that we are addressing and how we are working at Inpho. We have different keynotes, as we are doing right now, and panel or open discussion. We have some companies selected for their pitch and introducing the investment opportunity. I will explain how you'll be part of that. But more importantly, we have discussion and workshops, networking, and to please everybody, we have also nice wine tasting. It's not the more important, but always good to discuss with a good glass of wine. That's helped also sometimes the discussion. What raised my interest is to have a look to the different topics, because indeed, if you look at the different categories that have been selected this year, one is deal with compute, AI, data infrastructure, hardware and enabling deep tech technologies, physical and bio-inspired systems, security and defense dual-use technology is definitely part of that, and deep tech for critical infrastructure. So we have a focus on deep tech, on dual use, but if you look, all the technologies mentioned here could be applied actually for dual use and defense, because as we said, it's a question also of value chain where we need to enter. So if you are a company with this kind of technologies within as a core differentiation, don't hesitate also to join us. When you write your questions, because we are receiving more questions now, just have a look to the next slide and you will see that slide that you will receive, by the way, that you can enter into the process. It's simple. You just need to apply, and we will send you the link to apply, meaning that you will introduce your company. We have a selection committee that will confirm if you are eligible or not, depending on the topic of interest of our advisory board and investors network. And then you will have one-on-one meetings, meaning that digital sessions will happen before Info. So you can meet with the investors fitting with your own interests and fitting with their interests. We have also a consensus meeting for the investors to discuss your case, and for the companies that represent a good opportunity for investment, but also topics we want to highlight, they will be invited to pitch live at Info, and you will get ready for that. So don't hesitate to do it. You have, as you can see on the next slide, until the 2nd of July to apply. And then the one-on-one meetings will happen between end of August and 2nd of October. And 22nd and 23rd of October, we will welcome you at Info. Whatever you selected to pitch or not, you will gain a very strong connection with private investors, sharing, as Emric and François are doing today, the expectations. So before we are taking some questions, maybe we can take 2 more minutes to address this question of vehicle of investment, as you can see on the next question that we have received. You mentioned, Emric, that maybe it might be interesting to have dedicated vehicles. We mentioned co-investments, could be also structured debt, or is it something needed, or can a classical VC can cover any investment on his own?
Yeah, realistically, classic VCs can cover it. On the other hand, we've seen entities pop up. You know, I alluded to In-Q-Tel earlier, right? For those who aren't familiar with the In-Q-Tel, they started as the arm's length government-backed venture capital firm focused on finding solutions for the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, so the equivalent of MI6 for the UK. But it was kind of a separate group funded, so they had independence, but really they looked at the U.S. government as a client. And since then, so that was over 25 years ago. Since then, they've really expanded. Now they're also doing similar things for the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, Special Operations Command, so the group that oversees things like Delta Force, Navy SEALs, et cetera, and a number of other entities within linked to the U.S. government. So they really become a combination of tech scouting, investor. They don't write the largest checks, but when they do invest, then they work collaboratively with the startups and bring them to kind of the different parts of the U.S. government. And that generates a lot of contracts, a lot of knowledge about where the technology should be going. So they're really quite influential. And it's been very, very valuable. And you see kind of an emulation of that approach in Europe with the NATO Innovation Fund. Also kind of an arm's length entity backed by several NATO member states, but oddly not all, taking an approach. There was a little bit of like debate in terms of like how much they should be focused on dual use versus defense, whereas, you know, In-Q-Tel is kind of unabashedly a defense forward, which makes sense considering their constituents. But that's it's a nice co-investment in the ecosystem. And it benefits portfolio companies as well as VCs. We've co-invested with both, as well as with corporates like Lockheed Martin, as I alluded to, and I think we'll see more of that also with European investors. You can have pure sovereign funds that are entirely controlled by the government. In a way, you look at the European Investment Fund. They're very active, both in indirect. They're LP limited partners or investors in our fund, for instance, and we've been very happy with that relationship. And then we also see them having very specific funds now focused towards backing defense startups, as well as investors who back defense and dual use. So that's also really useful for the ecosystem, because that comes with kind of a door opening and a leverage effect. And so all these things, it's not a one or the other. Basically, you can have all of this working in tandem for the benefit of portfolio companies in the ecosystem, as well as the customers down the road, right? Because obviously more money with smart money going into startups lets them improve the products, which ultimately is beneficial to, in the case of defense, the governments deploying these solutions.
Clearly. Okay. François, do you have any point to add on this question, or we jump to the question from the participant?
Yeah, just to add to data point, the first one is that apparently the debt, grants and debt are playing a role in Ukraine, and I think it's smart. It helps the company kickstart. It's probably something that is much more rapidly efficient. I don't know the long-term effect than trying to have government-funded fund of funds and so on. So that is a playbook that is worth watching more closely. And you have, when we say sovereign, you have all colors of sovereign, and apparently in the Nordics and Baltic countries, you have a different sort of shades of sovereign that makes it also vehicles that can move at a decent pace, which is something that is absolutely critical in the new environment that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the Nordics in particular, because you're right. I mean, obviously France has BPI France, for instance, has been very strong with backing startups and VCs. Nordics have equivalent structures, but one of the interesting things around defense and kind of one of the risks is that some limited partners have kind of red line things that are kind of like go back to the days of kind of sins of like gambling, vices, et cetera, and firearms and weapons were considered part of that, which is, but now increasingly some of those limitations are going away because people realize that, it's the various European governments have stakes in a lot of the primes. There's no problem with the primes making tanks and things like that. So why should startups be limited? And so some of the Nordic region sovereign wealth funds actually have an aspect to say, like, if people can't invest in defense solutions, even if they're kinetic, they won't invest in the fund because they look at kind of this as an existential threat. Most of the kind of Scandinavian countries, a lot of them were invaded either in World War II or by the Soviet Union in the case of the Baltics, et cetera. So they're very sensitive for that. They believe in a strong defense. That means startups need the capabilities to do solutions that are very kinetic and leave a lasting impact. And I'd say, missiles are the new investment.
Yes.
So we were expecting some disagreement, but we don't have any disagreement between you two. That's fine. That's good. A question.
This time,
also,
maybe in person. We're gonna save the really spicy stuff for Bordeaux. The people in the seats.
Very good. So now let's jump to the questions. And I have an additional questions for you later about more the political aspect, but I prefer we are jumping to the question from our audience right now. Will your portfolio include companies doing automated optical inspection hardware for AI chiplet integration? Would you consider that relevant for dual use and defense application? Who wants to start?
If you have a lot of questions, we can try to answer quickly. And I would say yes, I think it's completely relevant.
Yeah.
So even at the chip level, right, for chiplet integration, which is definitely a strong topic in semiconductor packaging, that's something that you will consider as relevant. So Arun, I think you should definitely apply because it seems you raise the interest here. Next question. What processes, policies, and framework do you expect your dual-use portfolio companies to have in place to manage ESG and human rights-related risks? What about going beyond export control and compliance, but also considering proactive risk management for potential negative externalities the company may have? Do you have a point of view on this?
Well, I mean, there are different aspects to that, right? I mean, ESG sometimes ties into kind of internal processes within the company. Some of it has to do with kind of environmental aspects. So obviously, if you're going to have a manufacturing facility, you want to do it responsibly, right? You don't want to be like polluting the local rivers and ponds just in an effort to make armaments. Polluting your own civilian population is not good in terms of resiliency and defense, right? You're doing kind of the enemy's work. And then as for the use of the different technology, ultimately that's up to kind of like the customers, right? And every country is going to have policies in terms of preventing exports to enemies, to countries that are considered irresponsible in their use of the technology. So there's a lot of debate about certain countries right now and how they're using some tech. But ultimately, that's all done within the legal frameworks of the countries in which the companies operate, and there are like structures around that. And typically, we see people going into dual use and defense companies really kind of driven by a mission for various reasons. Some of them may have served in the government or in the military before. They're trying to be a force for good. Some of them, especially in the case of Europeans, right? They still remember, they still have grandparents or great-grandparents that were negatively affected by World War II, and they're still, so they want to kind of prevent similar cases. So we expect people, ethical founders, to bring kind of their own frameworks to bear on how they operate their companies.
At the fund level, you don't have specific framework related to ESG or
well, I mean, there are things that are, some of our LP, European Investment Fund has some aspects which they consider and typically are passed on to the funds and which they invest for us to pass along to our portfolio companies. So it's nothing there that would be kind of surprising or really problematic for the companies. It's not quite reasonable.
Okay, Francois, a point of view on this?
I think the existing framework is already contested, but it's definitely not working in this new environment. So we'll all learn on that. The LP and the regulators and the legislator have a big role to play. They have to set the limits and to take also their responsibility into how they deal with the different contradicting objectives. I mean, they want companies that move fast, that don't need too much capital because they don't want to put too much government money into it, but they also want sales to be under control, margins under control, not to sell to everybody. So there are a lot of conflicting objectives, and at some point of time, it's the legislature and also the LPs who will have to set the limit.
Perfect. Thank you for your answer to this question. I have another question from the participants, more related to your expectation in terms of pitch on this topic of dual use and defense. The question is, are you looking for a classical pitch deck, or how do you look at the go-to-market strategy? Any unusual points that the potential customer are rather less and the traction will be far harder to get? So the question is on this market strategy, what are your expectations when you assess a company and you make your investment decision?
I can start with this one. We look at the connection with the Ukrainian front and how fast people can prove their product and show that it's actually combat ready, not in the lab, but on the ground. So it's how they're going to sell and how they're going to how their product is going to fit the needs of the Ukrainian brigades and general environment, infrastructure, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, right? If you can make it in Ukraine, you can make it in a lot of different places. Some things are unique to the situation in Ukraine, but yes, things are going to get really heavily combat tested in Ukraine, and that's where sometimes there's some cosplaying on the part of some startups, including some high-profile ones. So where people kind of say, "Oh, it's been tested in Ukraine," that may have meant that they kind of crossed the border and did some test flights. It's very different from having been deployed by Ukrainian forces or tested with them in active combat versus enemies. You talk to some Ukrainian military folks, sometimes they joke that some of the solutions coming from some larger companies in the West, they love the products because they can strip them for spare parts to put them in things that actually work. So sometimes some companies get ahead of themselves in terms of marketing hype versus the reality of what their products can deliver on the field. And what's exciting also, you see some countries like Estonia doing areas and where you can kind of test systems and kind of a more open. Every country has kind of like military kind of proving grounds and testing grounds. Some of those governments in the Baltics have been very aggressive in terms of doing places where you can test in kind of semi-real world environments sometimes even against other startups or against other kind of defense tech providers. So it's a good way of de-risking some of the tech development. And as for things we look for expertise in the sector, whether people come from the military, or if they come from primes or other companies involved actively in the ecosystem. We want them to understand what the technology is going for and how to work with their potential customers in the area.
So that brings me to the next question. If you are investing in a company that might be in an unstable region, how do you protect your portfolio position? It might be more risky, but maybe the innovation, as you mentioned, is advancing faster than in more mature markets in a more stable region in terms of conflict. So how do you deal with this? And are you ready to invest in those unstable regions now?
Yeah, so what you see, for instance, some people will consider Ukraine unstable just because of the factor of being bombed, and increasingly so by the Russians. So it brings a certain risk there. So what a lot of Ukrainian companies have done is set up holding companies, parent companies in European jurisdictions, most often, occasionally American ones. But so you see a lot of the places, sometimes it's the UK, sometimes it's Estonia, sometimes it's Latvia, sometimes Germany. So the intellectual property, a lot of the core assets go in the kind of EU, UK, or US parent company, and then you have the Ukrainian company as kind of subsidiary, where sometimes the engineering may be done there in large part. And the other thing they're doing increasingly as well, so that's in terms of like assets, intellectual property, equity, funds, et cetera. The other risk obviously is when you're doing manufacturing, some Ukrainian companies basically are doing kind of stealth manufacturing facilities or distributing their manufacturing facilities across Ukraine so that there's not one site that can be bombed by the Russians. The other thing they're doing is pretty quickly striking up partnerships to open up manufacturing facilities either in the US, in Europe, or in all of the above. That's one way of de-risking the actual way of getting the products manufactured. Also, they want them reasonably close to the front lines, but not in an area where the Russians are going to find out about it and target it. And you've already had cases that have come up publicly about startups that, oh yeah, that was a facility we had that got blown up by the Russians in one of the recent attacks in Ukraine. But yes, we would totally invest in companies.
Sorry. Adaptation is the name of the game, and we trust founders. I mean, our job is really to support founders. Sometimes we have opinions and convictions, and we can share with them, but on these aspects, they really are at the heart of the danger when there is danger, and they know probably much better than we can. So we first ask them what they think about it.
Interesting indeed. That's bring me to another questions that we received about which TRL do you invest in, and that's maybe also a question related to the market maturity, but also the technology maturity. Do you have some specific expectation? And when you answer, I'm going to also ask a question to the participants if they are planning to attend Inpho, so we can recontact them back also. So maybe, Emmerich, you want to answer the question on TRL first?
Oh, TRL. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. There was the audio got garbled a little bit. We're flexible. We're early stage, so sometimes we're investing when people have an idea. Sometimes it's when they have a prototype. So there's a broad range of TRL levels in which we've invested. So we're really agnostic to it. Going back to François's comment about trusting the team, we kind of evaluate, it's kind of the intersection of the TRL of the product and the experience level of the team and what they've been able to accomplish in the past, right? People have been able to accomplish a lot and shown really a track record of developing technology successfully. We're willing to take more of a bet on it being early stage, and doesn't have to be like formally developed, like say they've been in company after company. Sometimes you look at people like developing technology for the battlefield in Ukraine. They've kind of compressed like sometimes 7 years worth of classic development experience in the span of 1 year, just because they're iterating week after week on products. So it's really what the team has done, their knowledge, their ability to execute, and our evaluation of that. So we go extremely early sometimes, and we're fine with that.
Perfect.
I would say the main element is what's the length of the development that are necessary to have a product that is really useful. maybe not must have, but really useful. If that's beyond 18 months, it's beginning to be problematic.
Perfect. So that's again open. That's also the conviction you will get first on the team, and then the ability to execute as always. I mean, doesn't change a lot when it's still with the dual use or defense. I have another question that I think is writing down that time on the slide. Is more related to the capacity of Europe to invest in the champions. Do you consider that Europe will have the ability to follow on the investment of the interesting dual use and defense company, or would it be could it become an acquisition later on from US or maybe China? What is your point of view on that? And that might be also an open question we can further discuss to inject more capital in Deeptech, also to address these sovereignty challenges.
I think if Europe stays out, the gap will be filled. But the question is also, can Europe have a different role in the defense startups than what it has in, let's say, general technology, like infrastructure technology with around AI, for example, right now. And I think Europe can have a different role because it is existential for Europe. And again, it's a bet. It's a paradigm change, but I think it is one possibility.
Yeah, in a way, it already has a role directly in some cases and indirectly, right? Between the various kind of like EU level plus country level sovereign wealth funds being in a lot of other funds, that's really powering a lot of venture capitalists to be able to invest in the space with some fine tuning of LP agreements and things like that that need to be done in the cases of some. What's funny, I was at an event on a panel late last year on the European defense, and there was a US VC there, essentially in a question trying to highly suggest that European LPs should actually be giving your money to US VCs because the European market wasn't that great and it's fragmented and all this kind of stuff. I kind of suspected that was a little bit self-serving, and I pushed back on that. And it's funny to see then that VC starting to invest aggressively in Europe. So part of that was like, hey, give us money, we'll take care of this for you. We got it, we'll take it from here, type of thing. And luckily, we're seeing lots of activity from our friends and other European VC firms to do trans-European deals, a lot of kind of like cross-border investments. So that's a good sign. I think the European VCs and Deeptech are heavily involved in the sector, and that's great for the startups.
But what you're saying, Emric, is clear for a lot of Deeptech topics. This is also
exactly.
an objective.
Yeah, it echoes what we've seen in other sectors where, like in AI, you see a lot of American VCs coming over. And what's funny too is you see, in some cases, some US companies kind of doing a little bit of like polishing on their branding. For instance, a couple of years ago, like a year and a half ago, all of a sudden Anduril started referring to itself as a Anglo-American defense tech provider, right? That's because they wanted to sell more into Europe. You're seeing partnerships between US startups and European startups so that they can do cross-border selling, so that they can take European tech, sell in the US and vice versa, to get over some of the sovereignty issues. So it's kind of a fascinating area right now on the kind of partnership development and funding front.
Géraldine, I warned that I had to go.
Yeah.
Very sorry. I leave you for the rest of the discussion. Bye-bye, Emric.
Thank you so much, François, and see you soon.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye-bye.
And see you in Bordeaux.
And speaking of Bordeaux, one of the things I can mention is that we've had multiple of our portfolio companies have the pleasure of presenting and participating in Inpho. I know they've really enjoyed those experiences, and those experiences have been great on the business development front, VC funding front. So certainly from my perspective, I enjoy it. I go there to discover startups as well. It's a great environment, and I've seen startups from other people's portfolios grow extremely well, including you were also early to have some Ukrainian companies, right? You look at companies like Chimera in the kind of wartime communications and radio systems. They've been doing extremely well, and I discovered them at Inpho. So they're not in our portfolio, but really respect what they're doing.
Thank you, Emric, and we indeed are looking forward to receive a lot of very promising company. And what I think is interesting also is to have this ability to meet before with the digital sessions, because it gives time to understand who is doing what and start discussing the different companies. So when the companies come to Bordeaux, they are already known, which is quite important. Before we concluding, actually, Enrique, I have one more last questions, because when we mentioned the go-to-market strategy, we said that it might be interesting also to have some activity and market validation in the defense field. But would you also look at a company that have not yet validation in defense and targeting dual use? Because of course, I think that a lot of companies now want to address dual use and defense, but they might not have the defense validation yet. Is it a bottleneck for you, a limitation?
No, I mean, again, when companies are early, we don't expect them to have everything done. Otherwise, it'd be a late stage company. It'd be different, right? We realize that they have things they're going to need to accomplish, and their solutions may not be tested yet. So that's where it goes back to the quality of the team, their technology, what they've done in prior years, and their understanding of the market and and that's where also going back, I think, to the comment Francois made about development time and things like that. What's important for people, there's an expression in, I mean, it's valid for anything, right? In terms of, it's used a lot for hockey in the US, but it's like, you want to skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is now. Because if you go to where it is now, the state of the art's going to move. That thing's going to be across the field. You're not get to the target. And ice skating in particular, you've got the momentum. You can't just change. You know, it's not like soccer where you can football where you can change on the dime in the field. You've got your momentum is going to take you in a certain direction that you set. So having a good understanding of where the technology is going to go, the needs in the future, and some of that people can get by having early conversations with constituents, with potential customers, and things like that. In a way, it's market pre-validation of like where things are going and what they need to be developing for that versus just developing for today's environment.
Thank you, Mike. Very useful as usual. So this is exactly what we are aiming at Inpho, to get your advices, your support to the company, because as you said, you might not invest in all of them, but you will have also this kind of discussion and strong advices from top leading investors that we quite deeply appreciate for your expertise, like you, Emric. And thank you again for your strong commitment to Inpho, because you are very supportive for the Deeptech European, but also global investment network. So thank you so much, Emric, for your time again. Thank you for our participants. And we are all looking forward. I will let you the conclusion word, and I'm looking forward to see you in Bordeaux.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, thanks again. This was great. Really appreciate it. It's always nice having these conversations with other investors, and look forward to meeting some of the people who are in the audience at future events.
Thank you very much. See you soon, Enrique, and thank you. Bye.